Jason Palmer, one of the hosts of The Intelligence, The Economist's daily current affairs podcast. The Economist's award-winning shows make sense of what matters, from our special series on China's president to our weekly podcasts on business, technology, and American politics. Our journalists provide fair, in-depth reporting on the events shaping the world. To get the annual plan for less than $2.50 per month, search for Economist Podcasts Plus to start listening today.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran McGuire. It might be a beautiful game, Kieran, but it's about 8:30 on Valentine's night. And how are you and I spending it? We're spending it together doing a football finance podcast, Kieran. Something's gone. The magic's gone out of our lives somehow, Kieran. It's always a pleasure to be in your company, of course, but just not in these circumstances, Kieran.
Absolutely. And our friend Tracy Crouch, she's retiring from being an MP. So what's she going to do next? Is she going to take over Palace, do you think? Or what? Who knows?
Well, I don't know what Tracy Crouch is going to do next, Kieran, but I suspect the Baroness wouldn't be too happy that the first thing you say after I mention Valentine's night is Tracy Crouch's name.
Yes. Yeah, no, I've sent her our best wishes for the future.
Yes, of course. Yes. Absolutely. We send our very best wishes to Tracy. You're in a hotel at the moment, I believe, Kieran, is that right? An hotel, as one should say. Whereabouts in the country are you?
Tonight I am in Liverpool. Last night I was in Burton-on-Trent because I've been teaching football managers all day long. And then I had as you know, I'm a huge fan of trains, but even by my standards, it was challenging doing Burton to Tamworth, Tamworth to Crewe, Crewe to Liverpool on Valentine's evening. That is Mr. Romance, isn't it?
That sounds like an old musical song. Oh, Mr. Port. Never mind, let's look into that. Yeah, as it is Valentine's night, our regular listeners will be reassured to know that I've lined up a bottle of wine for myself. So that's as romantic as it's getting, Kieran. So it's Newsday, Kieran. And as usual, we have a wide-ranging spread of news stories. Our good friends at the Newport Price of Music will be pleased to hear that two of our stories later on, Kieran, involve music bands at different ends of the spectrum. We have all sorts of stories, but our first five stories tonight, Kieran, all involve the Premier League. And the first one is the Premier League and Sir Jim Ratcliffe.
Yes, so we've been waiting for white smoke to rise up from Premier League towers. And the good news from the perspective of Manchester United fans is that his proposal to buy 25% of A, the shares of the Glazers, but B, shares from private shareholders has been approved. Everton fans will be going, hold on, he came in this quite late and he seems to have been approved quite quickly. Why is that when we're still hanging around waiting for 777? Well, I think it's something to do with the fact that he was able to show the Premier League that he said he had about £4.4 billion or $1 billion just sitting in a bank account, not doing very much. And that's quite persuasive in terms of the key issues. Clearly, he doesn't have any outstanding convictions. Does he have the resources? Yes. Where the resources come from? He said, well, I'm Mr. Ineos, and just take a look at our accounts. Whereas 777 are at the other end of the spectrum when it comes to being able to demonstrate those particular facets. So it looks as if he'll be able to put sort of formal boots on the ground. Clearly, sort of informally, he's been to Old Trafford, he's spoken to staff. There's been the appointment of the new chief executive. It looks as if his share offer was accepted by more than 25% of shareholders in the A shares. So because that was over accepted, he'll have to scale back. So if perhaps he was going to go and buy 500 shares from person A, that might be scaled back to say 420 and so on. But I think from Manchester United fans' point of view, they seem to have a bit of faith in him. He's got $300 million in another pot, which he's going to allocate to the club. Ideally, I think that should be going on infrastructure, both for fans in terms of the stadium and elsewhere in terms of facilities to have an elite playing environment.
Yes, I have very clear memories, Kieran, of the headmaster at my old school saying, "Now remember, boys, white smoke from the Vatican could mean the kitchen's on fire." And that's an analogy I've waited 50 odd years to get to use, Kieran, because it means nothing outside the confines of a Catholic grammar school. Is there a minimum, Kieran, that you invest before you don't need approval from the Premier League? So if Sir Jim Ratcliffe was buying a 10%, 12% stake, would that still have needed clearance from the Premier League?
I think the threshold is 9.9. So you can go up to 9.9 privately, and anything beyond that, you have to be able to demonstrate a little bit more in terms of your background. So the Premier League are taking a more forensic approach as far as their relationship with clubs is concerned, and that's got to be applauded, because we don't want ne'er-do-wells coming into the beautiful game. And there certainly have been some people who have been knocked back. We know in terms of Sheffield United, for example, was it Dozy and Wozy? He was subsequently up on a few charges from the FBI for various misdemeanors. So it's bullets dodged thanks to and the EFL as well, both the bodies who we don't always give an easy time to, but on these occasions, I think they've done the right thing.
Yeah, not implying in any way, Kieran, that 777 are ne'er-do-wells. No, sorry, Bob. That's not our job. We talk, Kieran, a lot about the accounts of yes, we talk a lot about the accounts of Premier League clubs, but it's never actually occurred to me to talk about the accounts of the Premier League itself, and until such time as it crops up on Guy's script.
Which has probably been inspired by my Twitter feed. You don't have any interest in this because you've got a well-rounded personality and a life, and I don't possess either of those. So therefore, it's on my list of Companies House klaxon noises. So the Premier League have published their accounts for 2013, and what we've seen is positive. The revenue, the income is up 13%, about £3.5 billion, and that's practically all due to the new international TV rights that are coming on stream. So we've got new deals in the USA, new deals for Scandinavia, and so on. The Premier League has also been partnering with official brands, which have contributed as well. We're flatlining as far as the money coming from Sky and TNT are concerned. So that's all good. Staff numbers are up. They're up by around about 40 compared to the previous year. I suspect it could be because the Premier League has bought a couple of new photocopiers and it's working its way through all of the 115 charges and all of the piece of paper that have to go as evidence for them. Because we saw with Everton, in respect of their charges, there were 40,000 documents submitted by both parties, and that was just on one charge. So heaven forbid how many pieces of documentation the Premier League's going to need for 115 charges. So the It's jobs. Yeah, we're in favour of jobs, so that's good. The Premier League's wage bill is 36 million quid, and if you contrast that to the EFL run itself for 72 clubs for £8 million. The Premier League club looking after 20 clubs, £36 million. And the SPFL, who are running, 46 clubs, do it for 2 million. So it is a different beast, and it has clearly more global footprint to have to deal with. The other thing that I picked up was that they had over £1 billion sitting in a bank account at the 31st of July. And then you're going, well, they've got all of this money sitting in that bank account, and yet they still can't pay up the EFL with the sort of the semi handshake deal that they had in terms of, but we've not got the regulator or a signed off deal yet, but we are going to, as a goodwill gesture, going to give you some money for 23-24. So that the optics, when we talk about the optics don't look too clever in respect of that.
It's very kind of you to say, Kieran, that I have a well-rounded personality and an actual life. In reality, Kieran, it's halfway through Valentine's night, and I'm staring at you and a near-empty bottle of wine. So that doesn't reek of well-rounded personality and actual life, to be perfectly honest. Although I suspect, having met quite a few of our listeners recently in the live show, that many of them are listening in similar circumstances. Two questions off the back of that, Kieran. You talk about salaries that the Premier League are paying. Does that include, do we know how much the CEO of the Premier League is receiving annually? And secondly, that £1 billion you say is sitting in the bank, presumably that £1 billion should be divided by 20. Is that £1 billion that the clubs have earned? You see what I mean? It doesn't belong to the Premier League. It belongs to the 20 clubs in the Premier League between them.
That's right. I mean, in terms of the first of your questions, Richard Masters, he earned just over 1.8 million last year. That's less than quite a few of the chief executives of individual clubs are concerned. So it's a fair rate. I think Richard Scudamore perhaps was on a wee bit more, and Richard Scudamore, of course, got a famous £5 million payoff for the Premier League for not joining a broadcasting company and being on the opposite side of the table, knowing the ins and outs of how the Premier League work. And also, Richard Masters, I don't think he's covered himself in glory in relation to the way he presented in front of the government panel. But at the same time, his job has got increasingly harder because it used to be the big six versus the other 14 clubs. And what we've now got is faction after faction and interest group after interest group forming and reforming. So the clubs are increasingly difficult to corral and point in the same direction, which might be an easier task for the regulator, because the regulator can say, we don't need 14 votes from you. This is how it's going to be. And that's another reason why there's opposition from the Premier League, because they like falling out with each other. They're definitely not getting on. In terms of that £1 billion, you're absolutely right. It does belong to the clubs, and the Premier League had already distributed 800 million, excluding that 1 billion. They'd already distributed 800 million to clubs by the 31st of July. And that's come from Sky and TNT Sports and the other broadcasters who have paid up front and paid in advance for season 23-24 broadcasting rights. So there's a lot more money to slosh around. But again, looking at those numbers, overall, the Premier League's income increased by over £300 million in a year, and yet they're not even prepared to give 88 to the 72 clubs in sort of more pressing circumstances. So it doesn't look very collegiate, I think is the word I would use. You and I both know that at some point in time, our clubs are going to be back in the Championship, if not worse. And we're going to potentially need a smoother transition than what we have at present. And I'm not saying that our clubs are ones who have been awkward about this, but I don't think that some of the clubs are taking a holistic view. They'd say that's pure self-interest being driven on occasion, and that's not in the best interests of football.
Yeah, unfortunately, Kieran, of our two clubs, I think one may be looking at the Championship sooner than the other. It's interesting. There's been a couple of noises this week from unnamed Premier League sources in various papers who are saying what we've said for a while. Well, the EFL have got nothing to negotiate with, so they will take what we give them at a time when we decide to give it to them.
Yes, yeah. We'll just wait till you're relegated, and then see how you feel.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
This next story, Kieran, I flagged this on the questions pod, saying that we would deal with this in greater detail today, expecting it to have become a far bigger story than it actually did. We've been talking a lot about multi-club organisations recently and transfers within them, and I thought this Premier League rule change was quite a big news story, but it seems that most of the media didn't agree with me, Kieran.
I think most of the media have got it wrong. It's not a sexy story, and it doesn't involve Manchester United. So therefore, let's look at something else. So this is in relation to associated party transactions. So it sounds pretty dull. It sounds as if it's not going to be a barrel of laughs. But it does have huge implications as far as the game is concerned going forwards, because you've rightly raised the issue of multi-club ownership, and we've just been talking about factions within the game. Well, part of that factionalisation has been the split between those clubs who are part of an MCO and others. So in respect of the rules which have now been agreed, the Premier League clubs couldn't come to an agreement in November. And sort of reading between the lines, it looks as if some of the clubs were nervous about voting against the current status quo, because they feared that they might be on the receiving ends of lawsuits on an individual basis. That has now, by all accounts, been dealt with. So the reason why MCOs are important is that if you're going to have financial fair play, or whatever they're going to choose to call it, and it clearly does appear that the clubs are going to go ahead with some form of cost control, then it's got to operate on an even keel. And what we have is the potential to manipulate revenues by signing sponsorship deals with very friendly parties at above market rates. And there's the opportunity to manipulate costs as well, in terms of you can park costs in those part of the MCO where there is no financial fair play. So you can dump your costs elsewhere. So that is hijinks as far as FFP is concerned. And ultimately it's for the accountants and the lawyers to sort out. But in the meantime, matches are being won and lost. And the integrity. We've spoken about this at the start of August each season. We think we could do a Leicester, but the more that the wealth in the Premier League becomes skewed towards fewer and fewer, and the ability of people to hoover up talent becomes, then that particular issue of integrity becomes more and more tainted. So what was interesting is you have to have a 2/3 majority in a Premier League vote. And we've always said historically that means you need 14 out of 20. But this wasn't that case because 2 clubs abstained. And it went through 12 in favour of the changes, 6 against. So that is 2/3 of those who voted. And 2 clubs abstained who are believed to be, and the Premier League is saying nothing. And clubs who are normally quite friendly with journalists are saying nothing. But the word on the street is that it was Palace and Aston Villa who abstained from this particular vote. Now, why would that be the case? Well, in the case of Palace, you've got John Textor, who is part of an MCO. We've got the Villa owners who had that investment in the Portuguese club, which they've had to give up, and they weren't very happy about it. But they didn't want to give the likes of Newcastle the opportunity to effectively say, right, well, then it hasn't been passed, so therefore we're going to sign players left, right and centre, shift them to Saudi, bring them back at a bargain price and keep within FFP. I'm not saying they were going to do that anyway, but the scope to do that would have been there. And there's nobody trusts anybody as far as the Premier League is concerned. So there's suspicion and rancour and similar bad vibes inhabiting Premier League towers at present. So that's where we are. So the rules are that you are going to be subject to scrutiny if you have any transactions with sponsors who are linked to the owners, if you are going to sell clubs when you're within that same umbrella organisation and so on. So it's going to make it more difficult for clubs to play hard and loose with the rules.
We'll be coming back to Newcastle and the multi-club ownership model in a while, Kieran. But in the meantime, I was really, really looking forward to the Premier League Summer Series tour, whatever it is. I'm hazy on the details of what it was, but I was really looking forward to it. So please, Kieran, break this news to me gently, would you?
Well, I'm just glad you are sitting down and you've managed to take your levels of excitement down with a bottle of wine, because the Summer Series, which was supposed to be year 2 of the Summer Series, there ain't going to be a year 2. It's a bit like having a blockbuster sitcom, which everybody says they loved, and they go, actually, it wasn't that good after all. So for people unfamiliar, last summer, the Premier League says we're going to have sort of a mini competition involving, I think it was 5 Premier League clubs. So there was Chelsea, Newcastle, Villa, Brentford and Brighton. And they're going to play 3 matches each at various places in the States. And it was all part of extending brand Premier League. And you'd be able to interact. And I mean, the crowds, I think, were very mixed. So I went to one of those matches. So I went to see Chelsea versus Brighton in Philadelphia, and it was probably about 80% full. And you were paying silly prices for tickets. So, they would have taken a fair amount. And we've got to be honest, Chelsea are a big draw. Chelsea was probably the biggest draw of those 5 clubs. And also they've got the historic links with Pulisic, who is sort of the American poster boy as far as football is concerned. I think some of the attendances for the other matches were below expectation. I think levels of sales of merchandise and so on didn't meet expectations either, although I'm not quite sure how organised the clubs were with regards to that. So in an ideal world, the Premier League club would perhaps want 2 big hitters if they're going to have such a competition. And it's all about raising profile, but Manchester United and Liverpool and Arsenal and Spurs, they're saying, well, We've got our own tours of the United States lined up, and we're getting a fortune in terms of appearance fees. So therefore, we don't want to be part of your little competition. And as a result of that, and I think Spurs are going to Asia anyway, rather than the States. So as a result of that, the Premier League just said, we're not getting enough interest from promoters. We don't want to take any more financial risk ourselves. And therefore, this experiment is being put in a cryogenic freezer. So it's not dead, but it might need a lot of warming up in due course.
Yeah, Spurs make an absolute shed load out of their annual pre-season tour to Southeast Asia, partly because it's not paid for by them. The shirt sponsors pay for most of it, and then they earn a lot of money while they're there. I do feel sorry, though, for some poor sod in America who bought 5,000 giant Brentford sponge hands and is now still sitting them in his lockup somewhere in Philadelphia. How's he going to remodel them? Our last Premier League story, Kieran, you mentioned the fact that they're sitting on £1 billion worth of reserves, but it looks like they might be loaning £20 million of that to have. I think this is a really interesting story, Kieran.
Yes, this is to the Newco, and this Newco is in relation to women's football, and nobody seems to be naming this company as such. But the women's game has challenges, and I was talking to a coach in relation to a WSL club earlier today on a separate issue, and we were saying, how many clubs can the women's game actually play with? Yeah, because it's not as embedded as it is in culture in the boys' game. You've got the Premier League clubs all have their academies, which hoover up huge numbers of young players. That's not happening in the women's game, and why is that? It comes down to money. We've seen clubs such as Manchester City and Chelsea have huge academy environments created because those players, they never go to play for Manchester City or Chelsea, but they're selling them. Manchester City sold players for about 40 million quid to Southampton who nobody had ever heard of. They never even got near the City first team. So they're starting to use talent as a factory farm. And that's a separate discussion as to the ethics and the merits of that. But in the women's game, we've seen this week the record price for a women footballer go to 500,000, which is itself is an achievement in terms of the direction of the game. But 24 clubs is where we are at present. And what the Premier League has said is, here's £20 million. What we want to do is to develop the commercialisation of women's football. So it's given a loan. And my view is, why not give a grant instead of a loan? But that's a separate issue. But it's not going to have to be repaid until the collective revenues of the WSL and the Women's Championship reach £100 million. Now, at present, it's probably only about 30 to 40 million pounds. So there's a lot of growth that has to be achieved. It looks as if this loan is interest free as well. So I think here the Premier League has sort of got it rightish. It's giving the women's game a boost. You've got to spend the money wisely. There'll be lots of people with red braces and revolving bow ties from the marketing industry saying, "Oh, this is a chance for us to get involved and us to advise." But we've got to, as far as the WSL is concerned, attendances are going up. Viewing figures are heading in the right direction as well, but it's coming from a low base. Arsenal have been getting 45,000 coming to some matches, but then you look at other matches involving the likes of Chelsea and Manchester City, who are two of the leading clubs in the WSL, and they're around about the perhaps 3,000, 4,000, which it's very, very hit and miss. So how do we get an audience that wants to come back? How do we attract people? Because Chelsea are playing at Kingsmeadow, Manchester City aren't playing at the Etihad, Manchester United are not playing at Old Trafford, apart from perhaps once or twice a season. How do we grow the game? So this money, in theory, is sort of going to be used as an incubator to try to knock heads together and increase the marketing side of the WSL?
I don't go to a lot of business meetings, Kieran, but I'm not sure how much confidence I would have if one of them was chaired by somebody with a revolving bow tie.
Well, you need to be hanging out with the marketing kids, Kevin.
Well, also talking of confidence, Kieran, I mean, the clues in the name. This is the early months of the new business that's running professional women's football in England. And I don't know whether it's a sign of confidence or a sign of worry that already the Premier League are loaning them £20 million.
Well, they need seed capital from somewhere. So if it starts to come from individual clubs, then Newco is sort of beholden to those individual clubs. So, but coming from the Premier League as a whole, let's face it, the EFL doesn't have the money. And again, sort of being cynical, the Premier League's managed to find £20 million down the back of a sofa. Why are you still weaseling out of what you were promising to the EFL 6 months ago? But that's separate discussion and separate squabbles. There's an element of self-interest, a successful women's game, wherever that success can be measured, and it shouldn't be measured against the Premier League. And I think that's the big mistake. I think you measure it against other sports, but not the Premier League is the cuckoo which is in the nest of all sport as far as this country is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, Claire Balding, Gabby Logan have always said that you measure it against rugby league, you measure it against athletics and the broadcasting deals they get. And you start to measure anything against the Premier League, and you're going to lose that battle. The EFL may not have as much money as the Premier League, Kieran, but they're looking to change that situation. I don't know whether the status of revolving bow ties is in EFL meetings, but they're in talks with big people.
Yes, so by all accounts, they're in touch with two marketing agencies whose name I've forgotten offhand, with regards to the EFL's international rights. And the reason why that's important is that they're not huge. The Premier League has a deal which is, I think it's £119 million a year, but it's moving to a slightly more generous one. But the international rights are only worth 26 million. Now, I think we have to be realistic here in terms of international viewers, like domestic viewers, have a limited number of eyeballs. They've got a limited amount of time at the weekend. And if it is Liverpool versus Manchester City, if it is Chelsea versus Arsenal, those are going to attract big audiences. If it's Sutton United versus Harrogate Town, there is a very limited audience. But it only makes £26 million a year in terms of international rights. And to put that into context, for every £1 that the EFL is generating, the Premier League is generating 65. So if you've got two people operating, if I'm earning £1,000 a week, somebody else is earning £65,000 a week, I'm going, that's a gap. That's bigger than the gap that we've got between the Premier League and the EFL in terms of parachutes and so on. That's big enough gap, but this is huge. So I've said I've got friends who support clubs who are down the wrong end of the Premier League, and they're going, how are we going to cope next season? And I'm saying, you're going to see more matches. You're going to go Saturday, Tuesday. You've got that to look forward to. So if you're crap on a Saturday, you can recover it on the Tuesday. And you will win a lot more matches, and you'll enjoy football a lot more in the Championship. And yes, they won't be so glamorous, but you still got some very big clubs in the Championship. So it's not doom and gloom. It's a fantastic product. It's great football to watch. So can we attract an international audience with that? I think that's going to be very challenging, because clubs like ours, when we're in the Premier League, we struggle to get an international following. You go down a division when you're not up against those glamorous teams, you can see the challenges as far as these people who are trying to sell the rights are concerned. But there's nothing lost from engaging with an organisation who's going to try to do that on your behalf and see how far they get.
That's me leaving a dignified silence there, Kieran. because to be perfectly honest, I don't want to engage with the EFL. They're very nice people, but I'd rather keep them at arm's length, if that's all right. Just for various reasons. I'm not at home to those people in the Portsmouth Arms who go, "Yeah, it'd be fun. We'll have a season in the Championship, bounce straight back." I'm not having that, Kieran.
Okay.
We can do another pod about why we haven't sacked our manager, but I think you know my views on this. And just to enlighten you, Kieran, the two agencies that the EFL are having talks with are called Pitch International and the Relevant Sports Group. I'm sure producer guy would like us to say that other agencies are available. Actually, quite big news from Serie A, Kieran, or it would have been had it not been voted against.
Yes. So there was a vote taken in Italy with a view to reducing the size of Serie A from 20 to 18 teams. And that was rejected comprehensively, 16-4. It will come as no great surprise that the four clubs who wanted it were Juve, Roma, Milan, and Internazionale, who are, funnily enough, the four sides who are most likely to be in the expanded Champions League. And there's now, we've already seen there are issues in trying to fit everything in. So again, self-interest comes to the fore. What these four clubs have said, we want to play more matches and we want you to have 4 matches less in a season, which, of course, increases the gaps between rich and poor. It's motivated by self-interest. The smaller clubs are motivated by self-interest. And, I'm sure if this vote was taking place in the Premier League, would you or I want there to be a 20 or an 18-team Premier League? We'd want it to be 20 because
24.
I don't want to sacrifice 24.
I want to be 24 at the moment.
I don't want to lose 4 fixtures this season. How does that benefit? And you get these people, the people who are in favour of Project Big Picture and saying, yeah, that's great. Yeah, stuff the fans of Villa and Newcastle and Brighton and Palace and Brentford and so on. It's all about the sneaky 6. But making the rich richer is a philosophy of some that I'm not necessarily in favour of.
Talking of Italy, Kieran, just as we've welcomed a new addition to our stable with The Price of Music recently, very, very good pod, Newcastle United fans will be welcoming an Italian club to their stable by the look of things.
Or will they?
Oh, okay.
Well, because this club is Roma.
Yeah.
Who we've just been talking about, who are in favour of a smaller Serie A because they are pretty regular successors in terms of being one of the leading clubs in Italy. So there is currently a £768 million bid. I think it's $1.1 billion. From PIF, so clearly linked to Newcastle. Secondly, a private investor who we think is from Saudi called Turkey Al Sheikh. If it's acquired by PIF, somebody's got to be top dog in a multi-club model. Now, Newcastle fans would want that top dog to be Newcastle United, and you can absolutely understand why. But Roma themselves are a big hitter as far as Italian football is concerned. So there would be problems there. What happens if both Roma and Newcastle United qualify for the Champions League? We've seen the issues with Aston Villa and Brighton having to get rid of their investments. So it could be a bit of a problem unless UEFA say, actually, multi-club ownership models, we don't care about them. Anybody can play everybody else. My personal view is have a workaround in respect of this. If you're part of an MCO, just as though you cannot have 2 clubs from England in a group in the Champions League, you cannot have 2 clubs from Italy. Well, why not say you cannot have 2 clubs from the MCO as far as the group stages is concerned, and then you can't have the famous Austria and Germany setup that we always refer back to. When it gets to the knockout phase, Newcastle fans are going to be wanting Newcastle to win their matches against Roma, and Roma fans will be wanting their team to win. So you can see that problem could potentially disappear. So yes, it adds a layer of complexity into the Champions League draw, but it's complicated enough as it is. So, another minor issue. So that would be, I think, one workaround which could deal with it, and that way we can still have, MCOs, because with expanded competitions, the chances of this happening is going to increase as we go forwards.
I mean, it does seem. I mean, there are enough conspiracy theories in the world, Kieran, as it is about adding to them. But the way MCOs are going, I think it's inevitable that UEFA will have to come to terms with the fact that this is going to happen. When PIF first bought Newcastle, Kieran, did they indicate that Newcastle would be the first of many, or was it kind of inevitable that PIF would want to buy other clubs around the world?
I think they've looked at the Manchester City or the City Football Group model, which has been beneficial. And they say, well, if it's worked for Abu Dhabi, it could potentially work for us. And in terms of the City Football Group, 12 clubs all around the world, the ability to offer the same front of shirt sponsors to different TV stations around the world, there are certainly synergistic benefits. So I suspect that PIF, they own 4 clubs in Saudi Arabia themselves. Owning a stable of clubs in Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and so on makes logical sense to follow up on that.
Yeah. Kieran, I can't believe I'm actually reading out this next story, because it seems, I don't know how this could possibly have happened, but it seems that Barcelona, Kieran, of all clubs, have apparently made a monumental financial cock-up. Stroke, I'm not going to say anything else in case I get into trouble with, I don't know what the Spanish is for silver tongue friends, but it seems, Kieran, that Barcelona, from where, I do not know, may have to find some money to pay a fine for this accidental cock-up.
Yes. Barcelona have been investigated by the Spanish tax authorities. And on the back of that, they said, we want €23 million. So
they must have their own department. They must have the Barcelona office, surely. Why don't you just spend every month, just send them a random amount of money that they think they owe?
Well, I think that's probably what they have been doing, which is why they've ended up in this situation. So they'll find some more economic levers, no doubt. They'll sell off some more of the family silver. And it's the equivalent of privatisation, and that's worked spectacularly well, hasn't it, in this country? So that's what Barcelona is doing, privatising the Socios-owned club. This is in relation to agents' fees, and Barcelona have said, in respect of agents' fees, the agent has just been working on behalf of us. And therefore, there's no tax implications as far as players are concerned. And the tax authorities are going to say, well, hold on, you've just signed a contract with a player. The player has also asked the agent to negotiate the contract on their behalf. So surely the agent is working for the player as well, in which case, if Barcelona are paying those fees, that becomes a benefit in kind. It's a bit like having a company car or the private health insurance, or the company pays for your gym membership, and you have to go and pay tax on that. So because Barcelona are going, no, you don't understand the tax law, Barcelona don't seem to understand quite a few things. Tax law would appear to be one of them. The tax authorities have said, we're not going to have that. And this goes back to 2012-15. So A, we want a load of tax, and B, we're going to charge you interest because that should have been paid many years ago. So yes, it never rains, but it pours in Barcelona, apparently.
Do you think Barcelona maybe need to take a look at their recruitment policy when it comes to high-ranking financial officers, Kieran? Do you think maybe they should have a look, just a bit of a clear out, get some new staff in who might understand how how these things work.
I think the last one they recruited was a guy called Manuel that used to work in a hotel in Devon.
This episode is brought to you by Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business. Want to advance your career or switch fields? An MBA from Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business can help. Earn your degree from a top-ranked business school with a thought-provoking curriculum, one-on-one leadership coaching, support from experienced career counselors, and full-time, online hybrid, and accelerated MBA formats. Join the intelligent future. Visit cmu.edu/Tepper to learn more.
We have been covering, Kieran, shenanigans is not the right word, but we've been covering UEFA political machinations in the past few weeks, Kieran. And I can only conclude at the end of which that Aleksander Ceferin has been playing silly buggers.
Yes. Yes. Aleksander Ceferin became the president of UEFA in 2016. And he was concerned, or he said he was concerned, of the fear of life presidents. Now, we have seen in countries where there have been elections that, and we've got, in the United States, for example, you're not allowed to be a president for more than 2 terms. Although I suspect I know somebody that's going to try and change that over the course of the next few years, if they get back in power. And therefore, when he became president, he says, I'm going to deal with this by introducing into UEFA statute that somebody can hold no more than 3 terms. And people said, we quite like that idea. We've seen in too many countries, Russia, for example, what happens when somebody gets hold of power and they're going to cling on to that power forever and a day. And that's not necessarily in the best interests of the world or World War III. So he did this, and then he said these rules are coming in 2017, which means that I was elected in 2016, so my first term doesn't count. And people go, hold on, that's a bit naughty. So there was an opposition from a potential rival to him who resigned from the UEFA board, and Ceferin then called him all the names under the sun. It went to a vote, and the only country that voted against Ceferin was the English FA. So I think you had green cards and red cards to show. So for me, who's colourblind, I wouldn't have had a fucking clue. I would have been, I'd go, well, I've got no idea what's going on here. But the red card was shown by Mark Bullingham, who was the FA representative. And then he looked round and there's 54 other people showing green cards. And he's going, I'm going to get such a kicking for the next few years. It's going to be the equivalent of Eurovision, isn't it? As far as any favours given to the FA are concerned. So Ceferin got his way, and then he paid his MasterCard. He says, right, well, that is the rule. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to stand for election in 2027. Or is he? Because is it going to be now a case of, well, I wasn't going to stand in 2027, but my people want me. I've got so many people saying to me, Aleksander, you've been such a fantastic president. Please change your mind. So watch this space. But it is, if you watch, if you watch Succession or programs like that, which were very, very sneaky. This has got nothing on UEFA and its politics.
Do you know what, Kieran? Twice during this pod, I've had to really fight the urge not to swear, and then there you go, like a little potty-mouthed Valentine's night. You little Irish, you can take the boy out of Ireland, but you. Talking of cards, I wish I'd, in the same way that you always bet on the opposition team, Kieran, I wish I'd put a little spread bet on with somebody, that the amount of times commentators over the weekend would mention the blue card. Every single game I watched or listened to, they couldn't wait for an opportunity to crowbar in. Well, that would be a blue card, wouldn't it? Which is, I kept thinking, well, I wonder if Kieran can actually see that one.
It's dark. I can. Yeah.
Oh, you can see it.
It's dark blue. Yeah. It's all grayscale if you're colourblind.
Okay. Well, if
dark blue's fine.
If producer guys are listening, I'm going to suggest a special pod where I can discuss the 38 reasons I've got why it's a terrible, terrible idea. I nearly swore then, but you'd already swore, so you took the words. Kieran, we're going to end our show with a little musical montage in a way. But before that, this pre-penultimate story, it's been a volatile time for Blackburn fans in the last few weeks and months. But this story is one that I can really relate to, because this story, doesn't matter who's in charge of your club or who's managing your club, there will be people all over Lancashire in blue and white shirts just slapping their foreheads going, that can only happen to us. What the... Seriously, literally. Because unfortunately, they tried to bring a lone player in, but it defeated them.
Yes. And we're probably not in a position to talk about mocking people for lack of technological skills, given this podcast, we've had to put it together in 6 separate installments, such is my inability to get the Wi-Fi working in my hotel. But this is in respect of Duncan McGuire, who is the player based in the United States. And he'd flown across. And initially, I think he was in talks to go to Sheffield Wednesday, and that broke down. And then there was a deal taking place with Blackburn Rovers. And everything had been agreed. And he was looking forward to becoming a Rover. And somebody at Blackburn, we don't know who, and we're not pointing fingers, because I say we're not in a position to point fingers, got the documentation, put it together, stuck it on an email, and pressed save rather than send. And therefore, it missed the deadline, and the EFL said, "You're idiots." And there's nothing in our statute. There isn't an Egypt exemption clause. So therefore, and it's not fair on the player either.
It's not fair, but there should be an Egypt exemption clause, Kieran. Yes. Just as Bobby Numbers pulled off a spectacular stroke many years ago, and he told me this afterwards. He said, I phoned up the tax people and I explained that you were a numpty and you had no idea what you were doing. And they went, yeah, we've got that impression from dealing with him ourselves. So, all right, I've got a feeling that's a card he's been playing every year since. There should be, every club, Blackburn should be able to say, look, Trevor Birch, it was Terry. And Trevor Birch should look up his little spreadsheet and go, Blackburn, Terry, all right, fair enough. You should be able to play one card where you can go. It's just, because like you say, it is a funny story, but not if they get relegated by 1 point, or if this is a player that might have prevented that happening. The poor sod who did it as well. It must have been awful when they. There should be ways around it. But anyway, Kieran, let's have our little musical montage to end the show with. Now, yes. I imagine you're far more immersed in the world of modern music than I am, so I should think that the Welsh heavy metal reggae recently Mobo nominated band Skindred are closer to your. I haven't got a shuffle with my iPhone. I've got a record player. But, I'm sure they're a name that means more to you than me. But I particularly like this story, and I'm also really pleased that this story came to us via a listener. We're always interested in the links between music and football, and I particularly like this one.
Yes, Skindred. I wouldn't recommend this book group for Valentine's night. As you rightly said, they are a metal reggae crossover. They originally signed to the Napalm label, which instantly makes me like them even more. And they've been going for 25 years as well. So fair play to them. Yeah. So they've done what many bands have done. Football clubs are in dire straits. So I bring you Newport Corinthians, and Skindred are a proud Welsh band, and much power to their elbow for that. So they've gone and sponsored the away kit of Newport Corinthians, and sort of, facetiousness aside, it can benefit all parties. Increases the profile of the band a wee bit. We had, was it Mark Ashton from Ipswich telling us about the sales of shirts, with the link to Ed Sheeran and so on. And it's putting a little bit of money into amateur football, which is great. Give them a listen. Give them a listen, gang. If you're pricing football out and you've listened to us and you've listened to the price of music and you're going, I need to stretch my bandwidth in terms of the type of music, and Welsh reggae heavy metal is the way forward, if you ask me. So fair play to Skindred, fair play to Newport Corinthians. Also in terms of away shirts, I'll just sort of throw into the mix Bohemians' latest away shirt, Thin Lizzy.
Really?
So yeah, Thin Lizzy. Yeah. So I'm tempted, though. If the Baroness is listening to the show, no, I won't go and buy it.
Is that a sponsor or a size?
No, it's a sponsor. I've got a Bose shirt because I'm a huge fan of Fontaine's DC, and it looks as if they're going to sort of have an annual band tie up, which is good because music fans will buy into this.
Yes, I love. Yeah, I'm sure our listeners won't mind us discussing this, Kieran, because we have discussed the links between music and football before. I love bands that have been going around for 25 years. I still love the UK Subs, who had been playing in pubs in Tooting for 10 years before they got anywhere near Top of the Pops with CID, which I've still got on brown vinyl somewhere. And I love the fact that if the UK Subs had ever sponsored a club, it would have been Tooting and Mitchell. Yeah. So, and also, I just love the idea that I imagine many Newport Corinthians fans will spend the afternoon watching the team and then go and watch Skindred in the evening. I love that. But our last musical story, Kieran, is probably more anodyne in terms of music. Cut to hundreds of angry tweets from unexpected Westlife fans among our listeners. But I mean, this could be big news, Kieran, because Robbie Williams has been linked with Port Vale. Westlife, it seems, possibly with Boyzone, are going to buy Chorley FC, but whether or not it happens, they've already been talking a good fight about where they want to take Chorley in the table.
They have. I think they were spotted in Chorley. Chorley is a fine Lancashire town, and how this has come about, I've still not managed to delve into it. Chorley lost quite a considerable sum of money in the last set of accounts. So, Westlife, they might have to do a tour or two to fund the club to take it and get it into the higher echelons of football. But fair play to them. It is all football is entertainment. Music is entertainment, and as we are both men of a certain age, we both love music and we both love football, because they've given us so many great memories on an individual and collective basis. UK Subs and me with the Piranhas and local bands and so on, and that's great. And here, why Westlife are coming across from the Emerald Isle to go to Chorley, I don't know, but go for it.
Yeah, let's be fair, we're both more likely to wear a Newport Corinthians shirt with Skindred on it than a Chorley. But Westlife and Boyzone are lovely boys. I've met all of them. Don't ask me to pick any of them out from a ID parade. To be perfectly honest, once you've worked with one Irish boy band, Kieran, you've worked with them all. Don't get me started on Jedward. Anyway, so you've already used up the swear word. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that'd be very kind of you. It'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And if you'd like to buy our book or get yourself a Price of Football t-shirt, you can go to the same website. We'll be back on Monday with our questions pod. Apologies if there are one or two little clanks on the recording tonight. We did have some issues. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran McGuire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you for everybody that supports us via Patreon. And if you you're in the second tier or above, that does give you an advert-free show if that's what you want. But I know people were just generous, full stop, which we're very grateful. There's a variety of ways of supporting the show, as you know, and one of those is to give us a review. And I always look at the reviews, and there's been many suggestions. Most of which appear to involve the Reading owner Di Yonga and a series of very angry animals. But I won't go down that particular. You can say whatever you want. You could even say you would rather have the show presented by Ronan Keating and Casey Jones, a steaming and a rolling from that fantastic show of the 1960s that we watched at kids every single holidays, because there was nothing on the television apart from repeats of The Magic Ringing Tree and Casey Jones.
The Cannonball Express.
The Cannonball Express, indeed.
Tooting and rolling, Casey Jones. You know, the Magic Singing Ringing Tree was terrifying.
It was.
But Jesus Christ, I mean, people talk about the 60s as a wonderful decade, but if you had a choice between an elderly, overweight steam train driver and a singing ringing tree, I'm afraid it was the elderly, overweight driver any time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.